Today is a particularly special day for me, as one of my very, very best friends, Jeremy King, is our guest on Table 4. With his restaurants, to name just a few, the Caprice, the Ivy, the Wolseley, now the Park and the Arlington, and soon Simpsons In The Strand, Jeremy has given London, and in fact the world, joy, stability, and celebration. He has given me the same. Jeremy's brilliant new book, Without Reservations, Lessons from a Life in Restaurants, is beautifully written. It's on the table with us now. We're going to talk about this, restaurants, memories, the future, and much, much more. A special day, indeed.
Thank you.
And here we are.
Yeah, well, thank you.
It's so good to have you here. We've been waiting for this, and because we said we were going to do it when you finished the book. And you did take kind of a long time to finish this book, so we are rather so happy to have you. What makes a great restaurant?
Well, it's a question when I would do inductions with staff, they often say, what are the most important elements of a great restaurant? And people generally, and of course they expect us to say, well, the location, the chef, might be the maitre d'hotel, any number of those things. And I always say, no, two elements. And it's heart and soul. And people look at me and say, well, what does that mean? And I say, well, it's difficult to define, but the heart and soul that we feel in a restaurant comes from the fact that the best restaurants are run by proprietors like yourself, and the best proprietors open restaurants they would like to go to themselves, and then you hope that enough other people would bring. And we are both restaurateurs. I often talk about when I correct people sometimes, which is a bit nasty, pedantic, when somebody very successful in the restaurant business, for instance, is described as a restaurateur. I said, no, they're restaurant owners. Restaurateurs do it from the floor. Restaurant owners do it from the boardroom, and the different shows. And it particularly the case with the River Cafe, and I like to think with my own restaurants, because the staff feel it and the staff know it. And I had a wonderful example recently, is because we were recruiting for Simpsons. We made an offer to somebody in a group restaurant, and they accepted. And we're going through the process, and their current employer suddenly realized what was going on, came back and counter-offered with a lot more money. And they said no, because I just received a card from Jeremy King welcoming me. Nobody even knows my name in this company, really. And that's what counts. And I think it's heart and soul.
Two good ingredients. And when you end the last part of the book is about the future. It's about Simpsons. So tell us.
Oh, thank you. Well, Simpsons is a 25-year journey. When we sold Caprice Holdings, Caprice, Ivy, Sheikas, Simpsons was coming up on the market in 2000. And tried to get it, and it was all across the papers, in fact. And then I tried again in 2008 and 2015, and they did a version. Then it closed with COVID, and I put in a successful offer. I think it was spring 22, and we'll be opening effectively spring 26. It's been quite a journey, quite a labor of love. And the date keeps changing, and people get a bit frustrated about it. And we've had everything from the main contractor going bust and so on. But a lot of these things in life, sometimes you forget just how brilliant it is. And I think with all of us, we see things much better through other people's eyes. And I remember taking a hotelier around a friend and showing around in the early days, and he was very silent. And I was at the point, because I was fighting on the contract, we had delays, there's problems, all sorts of things, investments and so on. And I think I was a bit jaded. And then he went around and I was thinking, because I was in that mood, I thought, oh, he thinks I'm stupid, he thinks it's wrong. And he looked around and he said, Jeremy, and I assume I can say this, this is fucking fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Fucking fantastic. He kept saying it. I thought, oh yeah, maybe it is. It really is. And it restored my faith. And often we rely on other people at our low points or whatever just to restore us. We're really close. We should be open by end of February, early March. And it is actually very exciting. And the tradition and the history and 2 restaurants, 2 bars, 1 large event space. It's massive. Hopefully I'll be all right.
Maybe we should start with the first piece of writing in your book, which is a dedication. Because as we know, dedications are usually to one's wife or one's father, one's mother, one's children. And this one, the dedication reads, "To all the wonderful people I have worked with over the last 50 years in this indefinably beguiling and wonderful world of," quote, "hospitality." Can you talk about that?
Yes, well, the publisher said I couldn't do this dedication because it went on. I can't remember the exact words, but it basically was saying, even those of you who've cheated me, bewildered me, exasperated me, and so on, I still learned from you, even that in that case. And I wanted it to mean something. It was an opportunity. I know we have acknowledgements in the book, but it's different. And I, like you, care most of all about the people, and the people is not just the customers, it's very much the staff. And without them, we would have nothing. Now that sounds like a beginning of a sort of Oscar acceptance speech, which will always be, but actually it is the people which make it work. Even the bad people taught me.
It is, I think that our work is about collaboration, so we walk in the door and we're talking immediately with somebody who does something differently from us. I don't know how to make a dish that probably they can make, and I don't know how to do the bookings, and I'm not sure how to do the cashiering, and I probably personally would be the worst waiter. I was once a waiter for about a week, and then I was sacked. But I think it's, there are all these, but what we do is we collaborate and we share and we learn and we work together.
So part of my satisfaction in being a restaurateur is that because of my inherent belief that all great movements, whether literary, musical, creative, painting, revolutionary, whatever they might be, tend to have their formative stage in a grand cafe or a brasserie or something. Restaurants are the catalyst for what we all want to make of our lives, and that's where it really happens. And that's what I feel people are missing out terribly on by so much working from home, because you don't have that interaction. And the person who gave me a great deal of belief was, of course, Caroline Michelle, who's very, very close friend of yours as well. And she helped me through it.
Were there other books that inspired you?
I think a lot, because it's interesting. I've got thousands of books, and Adrian Gill used to say, "What are you going to do with all these books? You haven't read them all, have you?" I said, "No, I'm keeping them for when I have time." Trouble is, I haven't generally had much time, but I have read a lot, and I tend to repeat read. I mean, at the moment, to change the style, I'm listening to A Dance to the Music of Time, which of course is 12 novels or slightly Roman eclectic, because it's different. And I have a sort of mixed group of favorite books, like can be Tender as the Night. Fitzgerald was really important to me. I've taken a lot of, I don't know why in many ways, but I've taken a lot from The Leopard, including the famous line which has helped me, which is, "If things are to remain the same, everything has to change," which is a little bit part of the credo of my life.
Well, first of all, where were you born?
I was born in Taunton in Somerset, and then we were peripatetic and went around the country, and then ended. My father taught me a massive lesson, which I didn't write about. I thought about it, is he left a really well-paid, prestigious job on principle because he realized that the proprietor was criminally dishonest. And
What was
he
his
gave
career?
everything
What was
up.
the job?
He was actually that was the sad thing for him, is that he wanted to be an architect and would have been a brilliant
Like you.
architect. And he had a wonderful drawing hand. He was one of those great left-hand drawers, and he gave everything up. And his other lasting impression on me is that when he told me at his retirement dinner that there wasn't a single day in the previous 40 years that he hadn't got up and wished he wasn't going to work, which was the most awful realization on my part. And there were other things about it. I think I wrote about he had a terrible boss who wanted me to come into their company, and I felt I had a sense of obligation. It was a good learning lesson when I plucked up the courage that I don't want to come, because I was very much a people pleaser.
How old were you at that point?
I was about 22, 23, I think, and yes, around that. And they wanted me to come in. They thought that I'd be the person to groom to take over the company, etc. And I was miserable, and it taught me that great lesson about only do what you want to do in life, not what you feel you should do, and which I passed on. And in many ways, the book, because Dear Caroline, and prior to that, of course, our old friend Ed Victor, also an agent, had tried to get me to write a book, and I said, but no, restaurant biographies are the most boring genre you can ever hope to come across. They're all got names like I Shall Die on the Carpet, or or the narrative is it was my honor to serve the beggar Marga Khan. They're boring, and their lists of names and so on. I'll only ever write a book if I've got something to say, and I don't want to self-aggrandize, but I love teaching. I love passing on. I love helping people. I love helping people even if I don't like them. That's the weird thing. Chris, who of course was my partner, used to say that about the staff. He said, they drive you mad, but you're helping them. Why is that? I said, well, it's for me, it's a trigger instinct. If somebody's in need of help, is being bullied or whatever it is, I have to help. And so the book came around really because of Graham Norton talking about the fact that when somebody was saying to him that national service should be brought back to give backbone to the youth of today, etc., he said no, they should work in a restaurant.
Yeah, it does teach you.
And and I think we learn so much. And all my kids who've had some very, very good things happen in life, they're very quick to put on their CV that they worked in the restaurants.
Yeah, I told you that I met the recruiting person at Apple for everything, for whether you're going to be a graphic designer, industrial designer, technical engineer for Apple, whatever you were doing. And if hospitality restaurants was on the CV, they had a better chance of getting a job. But we were talking about your father and growing up with a man who didn't want to go to work every day. What was life like in your house? Who cooked? Did your mother cook a meal? Did you sit down for dinner every night?
We would eat together quite a lot. If you ask my mother what's the biggest chore of her day, it would be cooking.
She didn't like to cook.
Of course, something we never see nowadays, thank God, is a pressure cooker. And that was the most utilized thing in the kitchen. She'd throw anything into a pressure cooker, and what came out was dégueulasse, as they would say, as the French. And the level of her finding cooking an anathema, I caught her once when she wouldn't come out on Christmas Eve to a drinks party. And she said, don't go into the kitchen because I've got presents out and I'm wrapping. And I came back early and she'd left the room, and I looked in it and I realized there weren't any presents there. She didn't want us to come into the room because she didn't want us to see that she'd cooked the following day's Christmas lunch already and put it in a hostess trolley, and where it was going to sit for about 18 hours. and that's her approach.
But you did sit down to dinner, and would they take you to restaurants?
They would. My mother was secretary of the local hotel on the seafront in Burnham-on-Sea, and we would go. I found it very exciting because for some reason the menu would be melon with ginger. Pate was the most exotic thing. Those are the days where there was a legitimate dish on British menus of tomato juice, that you'd get a small glass of tomato juice.
That was a start. Yeah.
In those days, but for me it was very exciting, and I think what we do with our parents, we either adopt or reject, and I did a lot of rejecting. A very, very particular moment in the two moments which I mentioned in the book is one at school when the headmaster said to the prefects, let's go back to my study and warm a bottle of claret in front of the fire. And it was one of the most evocative things. I mean, you shouldn't warm it in front of the fire anyway, but it caught my imagination. And then I would find out about food through literature, certainly not from the school. So when we'd finished A-levels and all my friends on their free day out, 24 hours out, who went to London and the Marquee Club and got completely wasted, I went to Petworth to eat in the hotel there by myself.
By yourself?
And I could still...
What age would that be?
That would have been 18. And it taught me the joy of eating by yourself. And I had roll mop herrings, followed, I think, bad choice, by trout with almonds. And,
so you can remember that meal?
Yeah. And, I can remember that meal. I can remember everything about it. I went back on a pilgrimage to find it, and the hotel had closed, unfortunately. The other reason to go to Petworth, which wasn't far from where I was at school, was to go and look at the Turner paintings, which had been commissioned by Lord Egremont. And that for me was perfect.
You went to boarding school?
I went to boarding school.
What was the food like there?
It was terrible. We had one dish which would come up once a week, which was called skiffage pie. And skiffage pie was named by the boys, and the folklore was that it was made out of leftovers of the food from the day before.
Yeah.
This is a place where powdered egg for scrambled egg. It was. Did
it upset you, or do you think you were just? I thought we talked to Stephen Fry. Do you remember that when we talked to him about his experience at boarding school, which really changed? It was traumatic.
It sort of did, but funnily enough, all of this I realised much later was kind of happening in parallel with Nigel Slater, who wrote that wonderful book, what's it called? Toast, I think it was. And I was acting out much of what he was doing. The beauty of the food being so bad is it got me off quite a serious punishment for smoking, because I'd been caught going over a fence, and I played you didn't actually catch me, even though it was clear I was going to smoke that, and so on. And then I got the Encyclopedia Britannia out and looked up hunger. And hunger, they explained what it was and a contraction in the stomach and so on. They said there are three ways of getting rid of hunger. One was to eat. Two, there was a chemical which could be taken which would assuage the hunger. And three was to smoke. And so I put it to the headmasters that I was forced to smoke because the food was so bad, and in the end, as often that they go away and let me
off the hook. And when was the decision to go into restaurants?
Well, I think one of the things for me, and what I try and teach anybody who works for me or other children or grandchildren, is whatever we do in life, let's just do it really well. And I remember that the moment I discovered that, when one of my mother's other jobs was a secretary at a school, and I got a holiday job at the age of 14. And they asked me to sweep the gym with a not very good broom. And I was just about sort of at that point, I can't, bothered and doing the best. And I suddenly heard myself saying to myself, I'm going to sweep this gym better than anybody else has ever swept this gym. And it started to become a mantra for me. And when I was meant to be an Oxbridge scholar, and the school was deeply irritated and frustrated by me that I wasn't going to be, and I was going to go to a red brick university, and I thought, no, because I'm just going to go into my default danger position of not aspiring, and aspiration is so important. So I thought, I'll go into the city and I'll become a merchant banker and I'll make lots of money because that will make me happy. That's where I discovered that money doesn't make you happy, fulfillment. Decided to go up to Cambridge after all, and applied and got a place. And meanwhile, I'd read a book by Luke Reinhardt called The Dice Man, and that's a book where the protagonist decides the course of his life through the throw of a dice. And I got intrigued, and it was very simple at first. Where should we go to eat? What film should we go and see? And then it got more complicated. Then I started to decide who I would be that day. We were joking earlier about getting up, but I'd throw the dice to decide whether I went to work or whether I went to work and lost my voice, or any number of different variations, and I liked that. And then I got a tip on a horse in the 73 Derby, which won at extraordinary odds because a bank client had come in and drawn down £5,000. This is a time when I earned £1,000 a year, and put it on a horse. And I got a tip off from the banking department. And that was the most exciting thing, is at danger. I suddenly realized I was actually rather addicted to danger, to risk, to gambling with so many things. And anyway, I'm rambling, a long story, but the matriculation papers came through for Cambridge, and I threw the dice on whether I went. And one of the throws said, a long shot, because there has to be danger. If you get the managership of the wine bar I was in temporarily waiting to go to Cambridge, within a month of your 21st birthday, you will stay in hospitality for life. And that's what happened. And
it's the throw of the dice.
A throw of the dice, which was a double six. And then I stayed, and it carried on. And then when I regretted that and went for career guidance, I was told emphatically that I was perfect to be an accountant. And I know why, because I'm arithmetic, I'm logical, I'm all those different things. But and I said, well, I might be a turf accountant, a bookmaker, but they said, perfect. I thought, no. So I thought, stay in hospitality and try and be as good as you can be, even though it's not vocational.
Well, you're better. I don't know if you could be better, but what you've done, personally, you might think there is nobody better. And I think that you have to look at that as the greatest throw of the die, because what would London be without you? But if you were giving this book and you hadn't written it, but you'd read it, what other story that you'd like to tell all the people listening to this?
I think the first story lesson I wrote, which was elaborated upon, was actually with my daughter Hannah, who was working in the restaurant. She was at university in America, and she was just about coming up to graduation, and she said, Dad, I'm graduating. I said, yes, I do. And she said, but, I'm thinking I've really enjoyed my time working in the restaurants. And people say I'm doing well. And I said, you're doing extremely well. She said, I was wondering whether I should come into the family business when I finish. What do you think? And I said, absolutely not. Mm-hmm. And she said, well, that's a bit harsh. Why do you say it like that? It's your profession. I said, it's very simple, because you use the word should. She said, how do you mean? I said, you said, I'm wondering whether I should come. And I don't deal in shoulds. All the things I regret in my life pretty much have been things I did because I felt I should. I'm only interested in wants. You want to be a theatre director. Go and be a theatre director. Go and fail. Go and find out you don't like it. Anything. If you come back to me and say, now I really want to be in the restaurant business, I'll welcome you with open arms. But everybody has to do what they should. And that was, I mean, it went on. I showed some professional examples of the shoulds versus the wants. And in a way, that's the essence of the book is, yes, there are chapters on Princess Diana or Harold Pinter or people like Peter Langen, who was not who was a hero, not a mentor, but a hero, the restaurateur. Lucian Freud. I've tried to write them so that we can learn from people, because if we don't constantly aspire to learn from people, we're nothing.
When you interview someone for a job and working with you at any level, can you sense somebody who's doing it because they should instead of they want to?
Yes, very often. And I one of the, you were talking about books earlier. I think one of the very really good books to learn from in all walks of life is Danny Meyer's Setting the Table, and he's actually doing a sequel at the moment, which I'm fascinated by. I made a mistake once, which I will never repeat, when I interviewed somebody for a very senior position who everybody wanted to hire in the company, and I was the sign-off. And I sat down with them, and within 60 seconds, I knew that they were wrong for the job. And 60 minutes later, I gave them the job, and that's because I felt I should. And that's because, and the pleasing, and it wasn't right for them, and I felt guilty for so long. I think we do know. I think we instinctively and intuitively we know so much. And the trouble is with society at the moment is this is all being suppressed. That Moneyball mentality where everything has to be statistically supported, or you hear people say proof of concept, etc. We're not allowed to be instinctive anymore, and we know much more. And but we've suppressed our ability because of social conditioning and expectation, and not upsetting people, and so on and so forth. And there's a certain amount in the book about using instinct and intuition.
And when I said that you've given us all stability and you've given us celebration, you've also given us joy. And what do you think of the joyful days that you have?
Yeah, I do realize I take most of my joy from other people's happiness. And I think something which is missing in society today is altruism. And I love altruism, the notion that you could do something for somebody else without any expectation of reward. And we at the restaurants, years ago, we closed Caprice for Christmas, and in those days we had to paint every year because the nicotine stained white walls. It was terrible. And when you painted in those days, it was lead paint, so you had to wait a week before you could trade because it stank. And we happened to have, I think we had to close a day earlier because of a storm or something, and I had quite a lot of food, and the staff saying, what are we going to do with it? And I said, well, I tell you what, there's a traveller's church near where I was living in Wapping. I'll drop it off there. And I arrived at the gate, but knocked on the door. This cleric came to the door and said, yes. I said, I've got some food. Okay, put it through there. I thought it was a bit off. And I said, can you give me a hand? And he was a bit... And then he came, and I opened the back of the car, and he couldn't believe it. And he said, I'm so sorry. I'll explain. I'll get this in and I'll explain. And they'd made an appeal for food, and they had boxes of different types of tin food, spaghetti hoops. He said, I've got 100 people downstairs who are getting angry because we promised them a 3-course meal and we don't have a dessert. And you bring me a car full of fruit. And I said, well, that's good then. And he said, it's brilliant. He said, who are you? Well, thank you. I said, doesn't matter. So I didn't tell him. And the next year I came back but then even more because we bought food. And he said, I did wonder, this is amazing. This is like a miracle. Let me help you. Who are you? I said, doesn't matter. And then we started buying more and more food. And for 15 years, we'd turn up with a van and put it down. And the condition with the driver was you must not tell them. And they still don't know.
They don't know. Maybe we should tell them now.
Yeah, and we got. But funnily enough, I went back to look, and the church had been deconsecrated, and but that I think that's joy.
That's joy. Would you like to read the recipe first, or we can read it later?
Oh, I'll read the recipe.
You want to
first,
read it now? And you said that you were looking for something in the Blue Book.
Blue Book.
You chose potatoes with pancetta. Why this recipe?
It's recipe because this cookbook has always been incredibly special for me. When it came out, it was the first cookbook I'd actually ever been excited about. And I had an opportunity to talk about it because I happened to sit on the Glenfiddich Awards, which was the big cookbook awards of that year, and argued with the committee because, I'm sure you won't mind me saying, there was famously one or two recipes which didn't quite work. And they said, how can we give best cookbook to one which isn't technically necessarily 100%? And I said, very easily, because without question, it's the most inspirational of cookbooks, and it will get people cooking, and it got me cooking more. And this is a particularly poignant time because I'd taken the kids, 3 young kids, down to the Lot Valley. We were looking for a new house to rent where we didn't have to be social. That whole thing about going on holiday and people driving 30 miles to have dinner, where they don't drive 30.
Somebody see somebody in London.
Yes, don't even see them in London. And I happened to pick up this recipe and started using it, and the kids loved it. And the kids, I mean, the memory of the holiday was great, although I did laugh because come the end of it, we got back to London, and I said, did you enjoy that holiday? And they said, yes, very much. I said, what did you enjoy about it? And I thought, would they talk about the fishing on the river going through, or the Roman gladiators we saw in the local town? And they looked at each other and conferred, and then said, because we got to eat more ice cream than usual. I said, well, we can do that in Bognor,
exactly.
do it in Bognor Regis. But actually, in a way, it was a metaphor, because the ice cream wouldn't have tasted so good if it hadn't been for the setting. And I think it's no setting, no experience is ever the same without the quality of food which accompanies it. And I cooked this recipe. The kids loved it and insisted on cooking again, even though it had alien ingredients as far as they're concerned. And one of them was on that steadfast jam on bread and nothing else. And this unprepossessing recipe kind of changed them.
Oh, well, it's a very comforting recipe as well, isn't it? So we can read it here.
So we're talking about potato and pancetta al forno, which serves 6, which is appropriate. There were 5, and I'd always have doubles. I'd have double portions. So 100 grams of pancetta, thinly sliced, fingers not to be cut, 4 tablespoons of olive oil, 4 garlic cloves, peeled and finely sliced, 20 sage leaves, 1 kilogram of roseval or similar yellow waxy potatoes peeled. Now, interestingly, I hadn't fully realized how important those potatoes are. And it's a really good lesson. 250 ml of double cream, Parmesan finely grated. Preheat the oven to 190 degrees. See, I always go 180, but there you go. Lightly fry the pancetta, stir in the garlic, add the sage, cook for a minute and remove from the heat. I actually always use shallots because I'm not so good not so good with garlic.
Note to self. It's a bit French for the River Cafe, but
Yeah,
that's okay.
absolutely. Slice each potato lengthways into thick slices, place in a large bowl, add the pancetta mixture and the cream, season and toss. Evenly distribute the mixture in a baking dish. Cover with foil and cook in the oven for 40 minutes. Halfway through, remove the foil so that the surface of the potatoes becomes brown. Sprinkle over the parmesan and cook for a further 5 minutes. Delicious with grilled beef or lamb. I used it with lamb a lot.
Yeah.
And it is so critical, that moment of removing the foil and knowing how long to let it go brown. But it was extraordinary, and something as simple as this was the catalyst for the children changing their attitude to food.
Do you think that
Yeah.
they... No, I think children do. How old were they at the time?
The kids were 2, 4, and 6.
Wow.
Yeah.
Little ones. No wonder they want the ice cream. Simpsons is so exciting. I think that if we do measure a city by its restaurants, then I think that London is a better city because of Jeremy King. The fact that we all, when we hear a restaurant's going to open, there's that anticipation. What's it going to be like? What's the food going to be like? How will we feel when we're sitting there? Will we go before the theater? Will we go after the theater? And so, again, you've given us something to look forward to in these, I would say, these quite dark days, especially now. It's a bit of light. And so if we all need light and we all need anticipation and excitement, we also need comfort. If you do need comfort, is there a food that you would turn to?
It is strange, and thank you for what you said. No, and I think the effect we have on the city, I always remember with Richard, who would quote, I can't remember the philosopher, that we should leave the cities better than we found them. Whatever we do. And I think there is a lot to be said for restaurants because they are the catalyst for so much, and we all go to them for different reasons. I spend a lot of time by myself when I can, and the comfort food, which probably if it's at short notice, I'm taking some rye bread and putting anchovy, a lot of butter and anchovies on top. If I've got a bit more time, I want to have some mash salad, and I will saute chicken livers, and often with a like a raspberry vinegar, strangely, etc., and luxuriating the combination of the two.
That's good. Do you toast the bread?
If it's fresh bread, I toast it. If it's one of those old-fashioned rye breads out of the packet.
Yeah. Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you.
Ruthie's Table 4 was produced by Alex Bell, Robbie Hamilton, and Zad Rogers, with Andrew Sang and Bella Salini. This has been an Atomised production for iHeart Media.